What's Higher Ed PodCon? Well, that's a great question. It's the first ever inaugural and first annual higher education podcasting conference put on by the EdUp Experience, EDU Alliance, and Higher Ed Pods. Join us in Chicago on July 12th, 2025, as we get together to talk about podcasting in all areas of higher education, including marketing, enrollment, student affairs and student services, teaching, learning, alumni engagement. How can you better get in front of the audience that you want to see through podcasts? That's what we're going to talk about. So we're going to have podcasters, producers, students, strategists from all over higher education getting together, sharing best practices, how you take a podcast to get in front of an audience and make an impact. Join us in Chicago, July 12th, 2025 for higheredpodcon.com. That's where you register. Higher Ed PodCon is the first of its kind event. We'll see you there. Welcome back, everybody. It's your time to Ed Up on the EdUp Experience podcast, where we make education your business. This is Dr. Joe Salustio back with you on another episode. And I have to tell you, I am very, very excited to repeat. I'm repeatedly telling you, but, you know, we're putting a lot of time and effort into trying to organize, we are organizing the first ever, first of its kind, inaugural higher education podcasting conference. Try that. That's a mouthful. It's called a Higher Ed PodCon, a conference completely dedicated to podcasting in higher July 12th, 2025 on the campus of the University of Illinois, Chicago. We have a one-day, it's on a Saturday, so we're not disrupting any operations across the industry. But anybody who is interested in starting a podcast, creating better messaging for their podcast, we're going to have experts, technology experts, podcasting experts, hosts, all be there. My co-founder, Elvin Freitas, will be there, and so many others. And we're really excited about doing this. We think podcasting is such an underutilized medium for higher education, and one that is growing in force. So we want to give everybody an opportunity to learn from each other, like we do at this podcast, the EdUp Experience, where we learn from amazing leaders and have for over 5 years, and close to 500,000 downloads of these episodes, because we bring on great leaders doing great things. And we've got another gentleman with us today who is going through, you know what, some tough times and some better times ahead. It's interesting in higher education how varied every institution is, and how headwinds are giving us all things to think about. And there isn't just one headwind. There are many headwinds that we're dealing with. We wanted to have him talk us through it, his leadership in these times. Ladies and gentlemen, let's bring him on the microphone right now. He's Andrés Acebo. See, I almost messed it up. President at New Jersey City University. Andy, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here, man. You know, first we want to always level set for the audience. You know, obviously there is some obviousness. New Jersey City University, so we have a pretty good idea of where you might be located. But talk about who you serve, how you serve them, and anything else you think we should know.
Sure. So New Jersey City University began as a teacher's college, a normal school in 1927. We're on the precipice of our centennial, right on the west side of Jersey City being the state's second largest city, conveniently sometimes considered the sixth borough to New York City.
Surprise!
With Lady Liberty right in our backyard, serving the most densely populated community, the most diverse community in the country. And New Jersey City University personifies that in its academic mission. The overwhelming majority of our students today are the first in their families to pursue a college degree. We serve historically underserved, underrepresented people. We are a proud minority Hispanic serving institution of higher education in New Jersey, with deep working class roots. The median household income of our students is under $50,000 a year. High Pell eligibility, Pell recipients on our campus who bring grit and tenacity and determination every single day in the pursuit of academic excellence, to not just change the trajectory of their individual lives, right, but that of their families and their communities, one graduate at a time. And so there's a deep vibrancy to our mission, that makes it incredibly indispensable.
Running a university isn't easy.
Yeah.
If it were easy, everybody would do it. And not everybody does do it. In fact, the pipeline to college presidency is a lot softer than it has been historically. Not as many people want to take on the really tough business, and it is a business of higher education. Maybe give us an idea of what New Jersey City University is doing now, and take that in any direction you'd like to. But, I think it's time for smart decision making. So you take that how you'd like.
Sure. So once again, I appreciate the opportunity to kind of tell the story of this campus. I took the helm from a very non-traditional background. I'm a lawyer by trade. I was the then general counsel at this institution for a solid 7 months in the middle of a fiscal exigency having been declared, and some faculty upheaval and no confidence actions against the prior administration. A perfect storm of political forces, if you will, both on campus and externally. The institution struggling for many, many years, dating with record operating deficits that only got further exacerbated by the pandemic, right? The dreaded enrollment cliff and the demographic changes, putting downward pressure on regional public comprehensives like New Jersey City University that are so tuition reliant. With stagnation in state funding and federal funding for higher education, only again further exacerbating that. And the board ultimately leading to the board in June of 22 declaring a fiscal emergency. And I took office as the interim president in January of 23, facing what was forecasted to balloon to an over $22 million operating deficit. Securing state funding, stabilization funding, working with our unionized workforce to launch pretty historic shared governance agreements on our campus. In 18 months' time, we recorded our first balanced budget in more than 7 years. We achieved rating outlook improvements by both Fitch and Moody's for the first time in a decade. While at the same time strengthening our pathways and matriculation and enrollment inroads by looking internally first, right? Recognizing that we can't be all things to everyone, but we have to be everything to someone who chooses us. Really being student-centered and not just in the colloquial sense or in the academic setting, but meeting our population where it is. And in doing so, what we've undergone is nothing short of an institutional reckoning that has led to a renaissance of our mission. We've overhauled our general education curriculum to become the most transfer-friendly public university in the state of New Jersey, meeting again our population where it is. And so we've deployed really a concerted effort here to not just right the ship for our institution, but to reimagine what a public university in a densely and diverse community can do and serve its mission sustainably. We've taken, Joe, very, very seriously the decisions that we've had to make and in who it impacts. Not all of them are popular, right? And that's to your point, if the job was easy, everyone would do it. But caring as much about the decisions that are made in tandem with how they're made. So we've made a series of decisive, disciplined, and at times difficult changes to restore not just our financial integrity, but our fidelity to our mission. So we've, again, realigned our academic portfolio to focus on our mission-centric, high-demand programs that meet our immediate workforce needs of our region. We've streamlined some of our administrative operations. When I took office, there were 7 vice presidents. There are now 4, right? Reduced the structural deficit that had forecasted to balloon to $22 million to having balanced budgets. And we've renegotiated key contracts to relieve financial pressures without compromising our student support. Again, nothing happens in a vacuum, particularly as a regional public comprehensive. We're not divorced from the politics of our state and our region, both federally and statewide. So we've made a concerted effort also to cultivate new partnerships, secure external funding. In the last 3 years, entering this next fiscal year, we will have secured over $24 million in stabilization funding from the state of New Jersey. It's the most supplemental aid that this institution has ever received in its near century existence. And then we've also begun to reinvigorate our donor and philanthropic engagement around underwriting social mobility as the core tenet of our academic mission. And because we believe that for a public university to have a bright future, we can't just depend on state funding. We have to have a collective commitment of its broader community. And doing so means that we have to confront hard truths, right, which all of higher education is reckoning with, bringing shared governance, faculty, staff, students, and community stakeholders into that process. And in doing so, we've worked to ensure that every decision that has been made with fidelity to our mission and to the students that were entrusted with their aspirations. And I think the result that we've seen in very short time is that not just the mere stabilization of our enterprise, but a solid foundation for renewal.
So what's the result of that then? Do it's an entrenchment of sorts, right? Getting to the point where I can never say the word, but financial exigency allows you to take very specific measures, especially from the faculty coursework program level, to say, look, this isn't working. If we continue down this road, you can't run $22 million operating deficits for very long, and have things work out. And, it's funny because typically in cycles, it takes about 2 years to get through enough cycles to really make any kind of difference. So, you're coming out on the other side of this now going, okay, what do we do? Okay, we've sort of had a renaissance in sorts. What steps do we take to secure our financial future? So what comes next?
So we're actually in the midst of pursuing a strategic merger with another public university in the state of New Jersey, with Kean University, that just recently earned its R2 designation, another minority Hispanic serving institution with an equity focus, recognizing that the face of higher education doesn't mean that you have to forfeit your mission, right? It just means you have to be much more nuanced and innovative in ways that, ironically, higher education is not best equipped to embrace, right? There's a place for tradition and legacy, but the only way those two concepts have any roots, right, is if you're cultivating it and making them future proof. So that's the most exciting prospect, right? That's going to be an undertaking in itself. Doesn't happen overnight. There's a lot of alignment that has to take place, of institutionalizing certain identities and certain offerings. But the culmination will be that this institution's mission not just survives it's the century mark, but it endures well past it. And that's an exciting prospect, mainly at a time where I think you read the stats, distressed institutions, right? NJCU wasn't immune from this. It didn't happen in a vacuum. Some stuff is sometimes regrettably self-inflicted. But there's a lot of macro challenges that have disproportionate impacts on more vulnerable communities. And I think what we're ushering in is it's a model that will be worthy of emulation, of how do you honor legacy and history and mission and consolidate focus on something that future-proofs that mission.
Amazing.
A little known fact about myself, I have been through. Oh boy, I didn't hit my sound effect button come off, so that probably didn't sound right. But either way, we'll roll on. I've been through, back in the old days, 6 teach outs. So I was at an institution that had 6 closed schools. So we were the receiving institutions, and then 2 acquisitions in the nonprofit space. These are complicated transactions. These are not, and they're complicated for a number of reasons. Not forget the paperwork and cycles and all those things, but getting a board of to agree to a merger long before the institution, like you'd think like, oh, well, we're at the year where, we're going to have another deficit. We need to pursue a merger. It needs to be years in advance so that that institution survives, which means you have a progressive leadership team and group that has been surrounding you at the highest level to say, hey, look, and you have to think objectively, because it's easy to go, let's see how it goes for another year, and then we'll see how, we'll see what happens.
right?
These are really, really tough decisions. Can you just talk about a little bit about how that came to be with your leadership team, with the board or the trustees? How did where did the strategic foresight come besides yourself, who's going, hey, look, this is what I think we have to do? How do you get people on board with something that's this significant?
So I think, look, it's almost a left-handed compliment that's been given to me, which is like, I take things personally, right? And that makes things raw, right? And makes you more vulnerable to feeling criticism. But because I take things personally, like failure was never going to be an option here. And
Epic.
right. And dying a slow death is not a strategy. Right. And
hope's not a strategy, right?
right, exactly. Right. Like it's a sustaining force, right? To like look at it, but you've got to look at what you're trying to preserve. And the minute you start extracting yourself from just the brick and mortar, from like just entrenched like myopic perspectives on identity, right? And you start thinking about the mission in a grander, broader term. I'm a first generation college graduate, right? I literally have the compass my dad used to leave Cuba and escape Cuba to look for freedom in this country.
That's crazy,
right? Like my degree's been my compass, right? It's charted a life that I could have never even fathomed. My story is not unique on this campus. My wife's an alum of this institution, so it became very clear very early on that we needed to be nuanced. That, to your point, Joe, we weren't going to wait to break glass in case of emergency, right? Which is oftentimes where a lot of institutions find themselves when they're exploring or contemplating these actions, right? It's when it's arguably too late. So our point is we've secured short-term stability in ways that I'm deeply proud of. We harnessed community engagement and partnerships, and being on the threshold of our second century, the best way to honor that milestone was to ensure that this place doesn't just survive for another 10 years and then, I get the bona fides of look what we secured in a short turnaround and becomes the next person's problem. This had to be about, we're going to leave this better than we found it. And that invites, right, that invites having to understand that a lot of people won't think you're leaving it better than you found it, right? That they're going to think like, wait, like, this institution's changed dramatically, or it doesn't exist as I know it. To me, the victory will be if the thousands of students that crisscross our campus, the families that entrust us with their future and their aspirations, that they're coming onto this campus and their pathway, their trajectory towards pursuing a post-secondary education has been secured, right, for generations to come. Again, and I like to remind folks on my campus, particularly the critics. And I think that that's something that leaders in varied capacities channel and absorb differently. And this has been something that I've had to grow in, which is to not privilege the critic, right? Like that doesn't mean ignore the critic, right? But just recognize that everyone's got an agenda and everyone's got a perspective. And most of the time, the overwhelming majority of the time, well-intended and deeply held thoughts and beliefs. But I think when you start anchoring folks around a broader concept of mission, and you make everyone in the campus in particular be proprietary about it, that was key. So a lot of this becomes with incremental, while still insisting on urgency, right? So in my 2 years in office now, we've overhauled our mission and vision statements as a shared governance pursuit. We developed our first ever academic master plan, a strategic student enrollment plan and retention plan, and our first ever student development and community engagement plan. And that was more than just rebranding student affairs into student development, right? It was just an operational overhaul. And all those things were to ready this institution for a transformational experience, right? For dramatic change, institutional restructuring, where now what endures is the operation, right? It might be under a different system structure. It may carry a different name, but the access, the equity, the work that so many people breathe life into on this campus has the strongest chance than could have been contemplated, even 5 years ago today, to endure.
That's so well said. And, man, there's so much there. There's just so much there. When you pursue something like this, there are going to be critics that say, it wasn't right. Maybe we lost our identity, we lost our name, and look back. But if you actually have been through something like this, the amount of foresight to have, and you think about coming in to shock and awe when you started, right? It's like, okay, wait a second. What have I stepped into here? What mess have I stepped into? Taking over this now to get to the point where you go, okay, by the way, if you're running 22, 30, $40 million deficits, nobody wants to merge with you ever for any reason.
Correct.
No one wants to take on mounds of debt. No matter what, I mean, we all are very good colleagues in higher education. But when it comes down to it, no institution wants to take on an insurmountable amount of debt as a part of a merger or partnership. That's just, so what you did is you got the institution ready to a point where at least you could make the decision to say, okay, we have a fork in the road. Do we continue it ourselves? Or we've actually turned it around enough to say, I think an institution would find us a viable merger partner.
That's right.
That point to get from A to B where you got to is transformational, because most of the time, and I know this, I can't even tell you how I know, but I've been in many of these meetings where institutions have come and said, we're interested in pursuing a merger. They're coming with the $22 million debt, and we only have a year left. And it's like, we'd love to help you, but you're just not ready. I can tell you, I was in a meeting with one school that was a month away from closure, saying, if we don't get an infusion of cash where we want you to basically take us over, we're going to close. And I was in the meeting where the leadership team said, we can't. There's no way. We don't have enough cash. We don't have enough assets to take on that debt. And that institution closed. Right. So people won't understand that, and I think it's really important to call that out. How you and your team were able to bring yourselves back to the point where somebody goes, "Wow, this is a viable option."
Well, I appreciate that, and to boost that the work of the team to attract multiple potential partners.
Yeah.
Right. So that was critical, and I tell that to my team and to my campus. From the junior faculty member to the maintenance worker, right? Like, the work of the last 2 years has strengthened our prospects, right? We amplified the value proposition, made ourselves an attractive partner, where someone sees what they can supplement, not what they can replace. Right?
100%.
Because to your point, Joe, like, we can all be good colleagues. But at the end of the day, we are all subject to our own boards of trustees, right? And we have our missions, our alumni base, and our faculty. Like, no one's going to take on something that waters down their focus and stretches their bandwidth, that challenges and potentially undermines their own institutional prosperity. And so, like, I would say this, right? Like, and this is all also happening at, to put it diplomatically, really unique times in higher education, right? And in our country. So, leading this work, and what is unequivocally an inflection point in this institution's history, is obviously humbling. But it's one thing but it invites this kind of broader focus, or like, it's one thing to talk about institutional resilience, and quite another to lead through the uncertainty, the urgency, and I think ultimately the emotional weight of systemic change, right? Especially at a university whose students' lives are so profoundly shaped by our institutional health, that like, I can't profess as eloquently as I try to, like, how indispensable our mission is if the mission isn't serving the population, right? And so the decision-making process that you've spoken to and that we're talking about here, throughout this transition, throughout this work, has been marked, I think, by centering, again, values. There had to be transparency, there had to be collaboration, and there had to be moral clarity. So I made it a moral imperative that this mission had to endure by making difficult decisions, whether it's sunsetting a third of our academic portfolio, right? Our academic portfolio, were maybe a quarter the size of Rowan University, and we had twice the size of the academic portfolio, right? Went through a process that gets contentious, but ultimately, less than about 70% of those programs weren't even appealed by faculty, right? So there was an acknowledgement, right, that change had to happen. And so we made those decisions informed by data. And this is maybe somewhat unorthodox here, but not just quantitative. It had to be qualitative also, because I needed to make sure that everything we did was grounded in human impact. I can't center who we serve without also honoring who serves them. So we engage stakeholders, again, not as obstacles, right? But as stewards of this university's future. And I think when you do that, folks made the work of this recovery and revitalization proprietary. And that builds momentum, right? So again, and it's also one in typical higher education fashion, one that's not without lessons, right? Like I think the greatest lesson that I've learned through this experience is that the real currency of leadership is trust, right? Like you can have the best laid plans, but without trust, Joe, transformation is impossible. Like going forward, NJCU is poised not just to survive, but to, again, model how a public regional comprehensive university can be bold, how it can be nimble, unapologetically mission-driven in an era that I think deserves and demands nothing less.
That's a fact. That's a fact.
Do you think the press, trade publications are getting the story right of New Jersey City University right now? I mean, obviously you have to go through the process, and for the audience, there are many ways to do a merger or acquisition type deal. The university that you're partnering with, Kean, could rename. If they're the merged into institution, they could say it's Kean University at New Jersey City.
Right.
It could be a sole member.
Right.
And they could operate New Jersey City University as a subsidiary LLC, and
a branch campus, right? Yeah,
branch campus and retain all of your autonomy and all those types of things. So there's lots of ways to structure it.
Right.
Do you think that the story's right? Do you think it's like, well, New Jersey City University president, looks to merge institution with Kean? Or is there just more that needs to be told about this? Because it's pretty quick news, and I go, man, to get to this point, it's crazy. Yeah. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Higher Ed PodCon is coming. Go to higheredpodcon.com. That's higheredpodcon.com to learn more.
I listen, I think it's more endemic of broader challenges, right? So the story being covered is not so much about, I don't think the shortcomings or the deficiencies in it, or the inadequacy in how it's being told is unique to NJCU. I think it's just, regrettably, it's kind of the challenge of news media, right? I think we're living in a society where clickbait and paywalls sells, right? And that's the market. And so folks want to be the first ones to publish, not the first ones to get it right. Yeah. So it does invite challenges, right? So I look at it as, to your point, something incredibly courageous that both institutions are embarking upon by putting students first. And that story, I don't think, is adequately told, because I think most people don't understand it. I think they think M&A in the traditional sense, right? And they don't really understand that this is a highly regulated space, everything from accreditation, right, to state. And when you're adding the fact that it's two public universities, right? Like you typically see this more in the space of, the private not-for-profits or for-profits that are like grasping, right? Because there's a different level of constraints. You're talking about 2-century-old institutions, coming together to preserve a mission. And I don't think that story is adequately told. I think my frustrations, as most leaders probably would have, is that when the political intrigue is what wins the story headline, and not the intentions and who's going to be served and who we're centering in this work. When we're successful with this merger, students won't be displaced. Right. The student academic experience will be enhanced. The student support services will be enhanced in ways that this institution, notwithstanding the determination and the efficacy of my colleagues up and down this campus, would never be able to mature on its own. It's just it's right. It's arithmetic. It's not a question of it's not just philosophy. It's arithmetic, and to finding this novel solution where you have a willing partner with a rich, independent legacy of its own, with a student-centered focus, where the demographics of our student profiles overlap considerably. The mission is centered. That story, I don't believe, has been told enough, and too often, I think it's to the detriment, right? Because it discourages, I think, from similarly situated institutions from being bold and pursuing things like this, because it's seen sometimes as a failure, right? Like, oh, they couldn't figure it out, they had to merge. It's like, no, the world has changed. And it's not just the enrollment cliff, right? It's not adjusted for inflation. Like in our state, institutions of higher education, and this is notwithstanding the efforts from the current administration that have poured a lot of dollars in from a historical perspective into higher education. It's still well below where the funding levels of 25 years ago, right? Where there's public distrust, the value proposition of higher education and a college degree is under attack and under assault, and not always without reason and good cause, right? So those externalities don't promote a business as usual perspective. And so this is a time for boldness and courage and fidelity to mission, that I don't think, a 300-word article will ever pay homage to. That no one's looking under the belly of like, oh wait, this is not a consequence of just downturn. This is securing a future.
That's right.
And so that's an admitted, maybe overly candid reflection on the frustrations of the work, because that does have a spiraling effect, right? That can have a demoralizing impact on the people doing the work, right? The rank and file who are wondering, it's like, wait, like, why does it matter then to like ensure that the incoming class is a strong one, right? If we're merging, It's like, well, you're securing your future, right? Like NJCU, again, this merger is overlapping at a time like this fall. We will be welcoming our centennial class. And to me, it's like, what better offering to that campus, to that incoming class, and telling it's like, we've secured your degree. We've secured this campus, right? And your diploma might have a different institutional name on it, right? But the mission and the focus and the access to this degree that will drive mobility for you and your family isn't lost. I think there's also, Joe, kind of a generational perspective here. I think I benefit, and sometimes handicapped by it, right? Of being a non-traditional, from a non-traditional background in this role, although increasingly you're seeing folks from non-traditional backgrounds take the helm of institutions of higher education. And lawyers in that group have always been maybe disproportionately represented. But I think I also represent a generational shift. I'm the youngest person to ever lead a public university in the state of New Jersey, doing so with the added privilege of leading an institution in my home community, in the county that I grew up in, right, as a public school graduate, first generation immigrant parents. I like to joke because it cuts both ways, right? Like you get ridiculed sometimes about the age experience gap. Some of us
notorious for that.
Yes,
you don't have gray hair and elbow patches, somehow.
You're not distinguished, and you haven't earned your bona fides. Like I've literally heard folks say to me like that they've worked here longer than I've been alive, right? And that's not intended as a compliment, right? Like,
right.
Right. And so my focus has been, it's like, well, my job is to make sure that it's here long after I'm gone. Right. And I think the perspective, right, is one, again, generational, but I'm the only college president in the state of New Jersey, private or public, that went to college in this century. Right. I was paying student loans off until recently. So the nuances and the transformation that is affecting higher education as a consumer of it is something that I'm viscerally responsive to. And I think that forwards an ambition, right? Like this was never an assignment to secure adulation and praise, right? It was a personal mission driven work.
I think that's So relevant. You're right in so many ways, and I think that's the consumer tendency of the student. We have not, as much as we talk about it, we have not fully realized it or appreciated it because our structures still prevent it. The structure still believes in itself so fully that sometimes we don't embrace the consumeristic tendency that the consumer has, and then they just go somewhere else. And we haven't. And it's like, I talk to college presidents all the time, and I really everybody. And I just go, sometimes I'm like, and I use this example a lot on the podcast, but the skip intro button on your favorite Netflix show. I mean, we're getting to the point in our personal lives where the expectation for speed and efficiency and on demand is so prevalent. I mean, you could use any kind of company, anything we use. Amazon delivers the same day, and all these types of companies around us, and yet higher education comes with so many hindrances. We have, love it or hate it. I'm just going to put it out there. I'm not giving an opinion. We have tenure, we have collective bargaining, we have unions, we have shared governance. Shared governance, some people terribly dislike shared governance. And I talk to college presidents, this, Andy, all the time, and they'll I can't say who, but the 5 to 10 minutes before we hit record is always sometimes different than the actual recording, because we get to, the job of an administrator at any level. You have to be a conductor of a musical department. You can't always give your direct opinion all the time because it is going to be unpopular. But shared governance is a big, huge hindrance sometimes, and a big, awesome collaborative unit sometimes. But we have these things, we just haven't worked them out. Transfer is really hard still. There's just so many hindrances in our professional lives. When we're humans at our home and we hit that skip intro button and we come to our work and we don't have anything that looks like that. I think you bring a much needed perspective of that bridge.
Yeah.
Someone who grew up as a digital native to say, whoa, what the heck?
Yep. Well, I've said things, right? Like part of the reforms, right, haven't just been financial, they've been academic in nature too, right? Again, I alluded to it earlier. Like within my first 3 months, we pushed through an aggressive gen ed reform, eliminating non-credit developmental work. Eliminating with that reform also the transfer, eliminating the excess credit accumulation, right? Yeah. It's mind-boggling to me that you would transfer into an institution and that all your credits didn't count, right? Like it's absurd. And so like as a consumer, why would I buy that product, right? And it goes back to speaking to like meeting our population where it is, right? If we're in access of equity and opportunity, then we need not erect obstacles. And many of the institutional impediments to retention are self-inflicted and imposed, right? Whether it's, financial hold thresholds, right? Yeah. To get wonky here, right? But for your readers, I'm like reducing it from like $7,500 to $5,000 makes a significant difference in people's lives, right? With very little bottom line impact on your institutional operation. So a lot of the things that we kind of erect institutionally, I think that's the confrontation that higher education has to like take on, which is a self-reflective one, which is a lot of things exist just because they've always existed. And I've had this conversation with my team, right, as kind of leveraging kind of my newcomer into the space and people wanting to tell me that I don't know what's going on, and this is really giving me the what for, right, and this is really how it's done. And I love that because my retort is always like, why is it always done like that? And people struggle to answer that question, right? They can tell you why they do it. They can't tell you why they exclusively do it.
And doing it over and over and again sometimes gets into the deficit numbers. Correct. That's how you get into the deficits is by never changing your model.
Right. Correct. And what that does then is that to sustain that operation, it naturally invites mission creep. Yeah. Right. This is when you start engaging in auxiliary pursuits, right? So that you can subsidize and supplement the bottom line without fixing and addressing your core business operation. And again, I've looked at it, it's like there's a moral imperative, especially as a public institution of higher education. You nailed it at the start of the interview. Like it is a business operation. but it's one that has a public charge in our instance, right? And they're kind of a civic responsibility. And to me, it's like a lot of our metrics, right, narrowly define what student success is, right? It's based on a lot of people just have enough of a command of the data just to be dangerous, right? So they'll look at me and we'll meet with legislators or community members, critics and supporters alike, and they're like, "Can we talk about your 4-year graduation rate?" And I was like, "You want to talk about my first-time full-time freshman graduate 4-year, 5-6-year graduation rate?" It's like, "Sure, I'll talk to you." Like, did you know that the vast majority of my students like end up at some point in their higher ed career trajectory have to drop to part-time status because they've got to take on that second job to help support themselves or their family? Or my transfer students, right? Like I don't get the benefit of everyone going, "Oh, wow."
is like the most traditional metric in the land.
Correct.
And it's like a
Correct.
myth. It's like white unicorn. It's a purple unicorn.
Yeah. And so to me, it's like you look at it, it's like you look at the community college space, right? Less than 30% of community college students earn an associate's degree or pursue a bachelor's degree. Does that mean community colleges shouldn't exist?
Yep.
It's an absurdity. We have to change the way we justify our work and how we evaluate our work to meet an incredibly much more diverse population, where that degree that they earn in 4, 5, 6 years has to mean something in real time as they're pursuing it, right? So that's where evaluating things like micro-credentialing, right? Like that piece of paper doesn't just exhibit a discipline, an academic discipline. It has to command like a certification of skills.
Yep.
And that's where higher education, I think, there's a value proposition for a liberal education, right? I went to Brown University, right, as an undergrad. Like I enjoyed my experience there. It's the epitome of a liberal education, of an open curriculum. I wouldn't trade my undergraduate experience for anything else. But the degree value proposition is the intensity and the critical thinking, right? That is transferable, and higher education has to evolve. The memorization of dates and figures, it does nothing when students can have ChatGPT help them write their term papers.
Yeah, it's a really good example. You know how an undergraduate degree with critical thinking in its core helps prepare you for that 5th job or the 4th job, where you're in a place where you've got to look 2 years, 3 years down the road and say, how do I make this business survive into the future? Let me think about all the options. So you start to think creatively. And so I think it's important to tell your story the right way. And I do want to bring you back for a quick subscriber only episode, but I want to give you the open mic. What else do you want to say about New Jersey City University, your potential mergers, anything that you just think the audience should know that you want to double down on? And say it.
I thank you, Joe, for that opportunity. I think that the culture of our institution is evolving, and I think that is something worthy of emulation, right? That there's a way to honor tradition and identity and legacy, but any organization, right, comprised of living, breathing beings has to evolve in order to survive, and it's not away from who we are, right? Like that evolution is not about distancing yourself from that legacy, but toward a deeper, more intentional embodiment of institutional values. And so I'm very, very proud, unabashedly so, about the next chapter. We're reaffirming this university as a place of belonging and excellence and accountability. And that's directly responsive to the critiques of higher education. We are cultivating, Joe, like what I call a culture of possibility, where students are not merely enrolled, but empowered, right? Where their success is not measured by completion alone, but by transformation. Like what are they left better off when they cross that graduation stage? Our student stories are ones of grit and sacrifice and ambition. And I think institutions like ours need to center those stories in everything they do, because our job is to ensure that institutions like NJCU not just continue to be a place where their dreams are made real, but a place where they can even uncover possibilities that were foreign to them. And I think we're doing that by deepening our impact and our commitment to student support, from mental health resources to career pathways to an inclusive campus climate that recognizes that great things can't be accomplished alone, right? That there's a fortifying and powerful work to be done when you find common ground and common purpose with institutional alignments. And that's from our community college partnerships to our in the works merger with Kean University. That puts us on the precipice of great things. And I think that puts us in a position to recognize that the challenges that facing higher education are not insurmountable. They're structural, existential, and at times self-inflicted. Declining enrollment, rising costs, shifting federal policies, right, are, I think, the visible symptoms of a deeper question, which is how do we restore public trust in the promise of higher education? And I think the work we're doing, and this merger in particular, is that we've chosen to confront these realities without pretense. We understand that the old financial models are not sustainable, that demographic shifts require us to be radically student-centered, and that the value proposition of a degree, again, like we've talked about, must be clear, equitable, and attainable. Like, it shouldn't be difficult to explain. Like, a student should and their family should leave an open house knowing exactly what they're getting when they send that deposit. And that to recognize that this is a journey, an academic journey that is increasingly less and less linear for those that crisscross college campuses. And like all great challenges, they also present really remarkable opportunities. And that's what we're taking on wholeheartedly, to redefine access, innovate in our delivery, and reassert the public good of education. And I'll leave you with this. I think if the last couple of months are an indicator, I think there's a resetting that needs to also happen from our side of this conversation in higher education, which is it's not enough to react. We're almost predisposed organizationally to react to crisis, to challenges. Institutions like ours must lead. We have to model what it looks like to be both fiscally responsible and morally courageous.
Wow, so good, Andy, so good. I love what you're saying. I love the leadership, and it's been great to have you here. I know our audience is going to pull something out of this, but we're going to bring you back quickly for a subscriber-only episode. But I'm going to let you go to the masses. Ladies and gentlemen, he's Andrés Acebo. He is the president of New Jersey City University, and you've just upped. All right, everybody, we're back with Andy for a quick subscriber-only episode. And Andy, I've got two questions for you. You step in to this position as interim CEO and president amidst what I would say is probably not an ideal situation for a first-time president.
Yeah,
to put it lightly, not ideal.
That's right.
2 years later, look through your journey. What surprised you the most about this role coming in, where you just went, you know what, this is way different than I thought it would be? And then give me something that you went, you know what, I thought this might be different, but it is exactly the way I thought it would be. Like, what surprised you and what didn't about stepping in, especially with your inexperience as a president, right? You're stepping into this role as CEO. Also, to your point, from a newer generation, you have such a unique perspective. What blew your mind and what was expected?
I think what certainly surprised me is how important community was going to be, right? I think you take this job recognizing that you can't do it alone, right? So that you're going to have to assemble a strong and dedicated team, that you're going to have to get a campus to go along with a lot of changes. But how sustaining of a force it is to be tied to who you're seeking to serve. That surprised me, because like it's been, I'm still waiting for the locust, right? Like, right, from fiscal exigency, right, to a cybersecurity ransom attack that plagued our campus, to a state comptroller investigation into the prior administration, right? A report that comes out 3 months into my presidency, to multiple joint legislative hearings where I'm quite literally being cross-examined on why my campus deserves to exist. Being fortified by community in ways that I think I appreciated, but I didn't expect it to define my work as much as it has, right? That it's not just sustained an institution, it's sustained my leadership, right? even the folks that have not always been so nice, right? Like, there's value in that exchange, right? Of like, recognizing that some people and this work requires you to be ready. It doesn't mean that it doesn't hurt when it happens, but you're the face for a lot of people for their angst and their frustration and their confusion, and then you got to take all of that, and so that you're almost a channel in the vehicle for someone's cathartic release, so they can be like, I got it out now. Now I can go work. Like, I hate this guy, right? Like, he's making these decisions. We're saying goodbye to some of our colleagues, and I think in earnest they would all recognize that it's like, it's like, I didn't make decisions that put us in this situation, and you can disagree with the approaches taken, but that almost validation of like the leader is supposed to be in and of the community. Like, you can't lead something that you don't belong to, and so that surprised me. The thing that doesn't surprise me, and I've been asked this before, which is like, and I mean this with all humility, I'm not surprised that we were able to stabilize this place.
That's right.
I wouldn't have signed up for this work if I didn't believe in the grit and the resilience of this campus. My first charge to the campus and my opening communication to the institution on my first day in office was, we're going to write our next chapter together. That our best chapter is yet to be written. And that's in the midst of clouds, right? That's in the midst of, dozens and dozens of tenured faculty members having just received pink slips a couple of weeks before I took office, right? And the criticisms of being seen as almost like untested is like I was 37 at the time, right? Like, who's this 37-year-old lawyer? Like, yeah, it's great that he talks about, his first generation roots and being a first generation college student, and he's from the community, and his wife attended this school. It's like, but this is existential. I wasn't surprised by our community being able to rebound and focus. I think, like I said to our campus, we need only emulate the resolve of the students and the families that crisscross our campus. And if we were able to do that, we were able to have hard looks in the mirror, having difficult internal conversations, keeping it within the family to the extent we could, right? That there's going to be there's pain that is short-term, and then the short-term is felt and disproportionately felt. I say that with grace, right? Like, I recognize that. But folks at the end of the day would be emboldened by the mission. And this campus, I've told people, don't bet against the people that I'm privileged to serve and work alongside. And I think I'm on the right end of that bet.
A lot of grit in Jersey.
There's a lot of Jersey grit.
Grit in Jersey. Well, ladies and gentlemen, there you have it, an incredible conversation, and hope you gained some extra insights from Andy and the work that he's doing. We're going to keep an eye. I'm sure the merger will, when it is successful, we'll be excited to see how it works out and the details. Hope to have you back at that point, Andy, to talk about how it went and all the things behind it. Ladies and gentlemen, he's Andrés Acebo. He's president of New Jersey City University. And you've just head up.
Did you buy your tickets yet? Higher Education's first podcast conference is coming July 12th. Go to higheredpodcon.com, higheredpodcon.com. Get your tickets.